Officer and canine rescue elderly couple from crash. Then the girl's words exposed a deadly secret. The wind howled down from the ridges of Silver Creek, Montana, carving white scars across the valley. Snow fell in thick, endless sheets, swallowing sound and distance alike. The world was nothing but white and breath. 10-year-old Emma Clark trudged through the drifts, her boots sinking past her ankles, each step a soft crunch that vanished before it could echo. Rex walked ahead of her, his coat dark against the snow. He was old, grey along the muzzle, slower in the joints, but every line of his body still spoke of strength. Once he'd been the pride of the Mountain Rescue Canine Unit, a name whispered with respect by the men who trusted him with their lives. Now retired and a little stiff, he lived with the Clark family, content to patrol the hills as if he still wore his badge. Emma came here every winter morning since her grandfather's death. The Ridge Trail had been his favorite place, the one where he taught her how to tell true north by the shadow of a tree and how to listen when the mountain grew quiet. The silence, he used to say, is never empty. It's warning or welcome. You just have to know which. That morning, the silence felt wrong. It pressed against her skin, heavy, breathless. Even the wind seemed to hold back, as if waiting. "Rex," she called softly. "Don't go too far." The shepherd paused, ears twitching, nose lifted into the wind. Then, without a sound, he bolted downhill. "Rex!" Her voice broke in the cold air. He didn't stop. Emma ran after him, snow spraying from her boots. The slope dipped sharply, branches clawing at her jacket as she stumbled through the drifts. Her lungs burned. She could hear him barking now, sharp, urgent barks that cut through the white noise of the storm. Not his usual bark. This one carried purpose. When she reached the clearing, the world changed. The smell hit first, burnt rubber, gas, and metal. Then she saw it. A silver SUV flipped onto its roof at the base of the hill, smoke rising from the crushed hood. For a second she couldn't breathe. The windshield was shattered, the wheels still spinning slowly like a dying heart. Snow gathered on the undercarriage, melting where heat still clung. The only movement came from Rex, circling the wreck, barking in short bursts. Emma slid down the last few feet, her knees giving out when she reached level ground. "Rex!" she gasped. "Stay back." But the dog didn't listen. He pressed his body against the passenger side, digging at the snow with frantic paws. His bark turned to a low, urgent whine. Emma forced herself forward, her mittens scraping against the frozen metal. Through the spiderweb of cracked glass, she saw two figures suspended upside down in their seatbelts, a man and a woman, their hair grey, faces pale. Her stomach twisted. She knew them. Mr. and Mrs. Anderson. They lived 2 houses down from her. Father's workshop, always waving when she passed, always smiling. "Please be alive," she whispered. Her hands shook as she pulled the old flip phone from her pocket, the one her grandfather had given her, scuffed and taped but still working. She flipped it open and dialed 911. "911, what's your emergency?" "This is Emma Clark," she said, her breath fogging the air. "There's a car accident on the Ridge Trail. 2 people trapped inside. I think they're still breathing." "Stay where you are, Emma. Help is on the way. Can you stay on the line?" "Yes," she whispered, glancing toward Rex. The dog had moved to the front of the car, placing his body between the wreck and the wind. Snow whipped against his fur, but he stood firm, tail rigid, ears forward. "Good boy," Emma murmured. The dispatcher's voice guided her through the steps. She crawled closer, brushing snow away from the window. Mr. Anderson's chest rose faintly, his lips blue but moving. Relief crashed through her. "They're alive!" she cried into the phone. "Okay, sweetheart, just keep them warm if you can." Emma pulled off her scarf and pushed it through a crack in the window, tucking it gently under Mrs. Anderson's cheek. Blood had frozen along the woman's hairline in tiny red crystals. The girl swallowed hard, blinking against the sting in her eyes. Sirens finally pierced the wind. The sound grew louder until flashing red and blue lights broke through the tree line. A patrol SUV skidded to a halt nearby. Officer Ryan Cole jumped out, coat dusted in snow, his face half hidden by a hood. Behind him came another shadow, bigger, darker, moving with the steady confidence of a trained rescuer. Another German shepherd. "Emma Clark?" Ryan shouted over the storm. "Here!" She waved, voice cracking. He rushed over, kneeling beside her. His own canine partner, Bear, sniffed the air, tail sweeping once before moving toward Rex. The two dogs touched noses briefly, as if old colleagues recognizing each other after years apart. Ryan glanced inside the wreck, his expression tightening. "You did the right thing calling this in. You saved them." "They're our neighbors," she said, tears freezing on her lashes. "Rex found them." Ryan turned toward the dog, who still braced himself against the wind. "Then he's the real hero today." Within minutes, the rescue crew arrived, the air filled with shouts, metal cutters, and the rhythmic thud of boots. Emma stood back, her heart pounding as paramedics pulled the Andersons from the car and loaded them into stretchers. But as the chaos unfolded, Ryan's eyes lingered on the ground near the rear tire. There were no skid marks. The car hadn't even tried to stop. Something about that detail settled like ice in his gut. He crouched and brushed snow from the brake line. It was clean, too clean, the bolts polished as if recently tampered with. He frowned. Behind him, Emma knelt beside Rex, hugging his neck. "You did it, boy," she whispered. Rex turned his head, eyes glowing amber under the flashing lights. He gave a single deep bark that echoed off the trees, half warning, half promise. Ryan looked up from the wreck, meeting the dog's gaze across the snow. For a strange, silent second, it felt as if they both understood. This was no ordinary accident. The storm eased for a moment, the wind shifting. Somewhere deep in the valley, church bells began to ring faintly through the cold. Emma looked toward the sound. "It's Sunday," she murmured. Ryan stood, snow crunching under his boots. "Let's get you home." As he guided her up the hill, the flashing lights faded behind them, leaving the forest quiet again. But Rex stopped halfway, turning back to the wreck, his breath visible in the pale dawn. He growled softly, ears pricked toward the woods beyond the road. Ryan followed his gaze. In the distance, half hidden by falling snow, a pair of red tail lights blinked once, then disappeared into the trees. When he looked back, they were gone. Only the wind remained, whispering through the pines. The silence returned to Silver Creek, heavy and waiting. And somewhere deep inside it, the first shadow of truth began to stir. The blizzard had not relented when Officer Ryan Cole returned to the crash site later that afternoon. The mountain was still breathing frost, the pines bending under white weight. The SUV had been towed away hours ago, leaving behind tire tracks and the faint smell of burnt oil. Yet Rex, the old German shepherd, kept pacing the frozen ground, his nose low, ears twitching at every distant sound. Ryan crouched beside him, gloved hand resting lightly on the dog's back. "You smell something, old boy?" Rex's tail flicked once. He wasn't sniffing for survivors anymore. His movements were deliberate, circling, stopping, retracing. The air around the wreck site was thick with the kind of silence Ryan knew too well, the kind that didn't mean peace, but warning. He watched as Rex suddenly froze, staring toward the tree line where snow had drifted higher than the fence posts. The dog let out a deep, single bark, then pressed his paw against the ground. Ryan followed his gaze and saw something half buried beneath the snow, a small circular object glinting faintly in the dim light. He brushed it off carefully. A lug nut, clean and silver, not rusted, and freshly unscrewed. That was wrong. Good catch, Ryan muttered under his breath, pocketing the piece of metal. You just might be onto something. From behind him, a small voice called out, Did Rex find another clue? Emma Clark stood there, bundled in her puffy jacket, cheeks pink from the cold. Her father's truck idled on the road above. Mark Clark waved from the driver's seat. She insisted on bringing the dog's blanket back, he said, voice roughened by concern. Ryan smiled faintly. That's a brave thing you did this. Morning, Emma. Most adults wouldn't have known how to stay calm. Emma nodded shyly, clutching the folded blanket in her arms. Grandpa always said if you're scared, breathe like snowfalls, slow and clear. Her words hit Ryan with a quiet weight. He remembered her grandfather, Sam Clark, a rescuer who had once saved 2 lost hikers during a storm not unlike this one. The man had been the kind of legend every cop secretly looked up to, and now his granddaughter was standing in the same snow, with the same calm in her eyes. Rex nudged Emma's knee, tail wagging slowly, his breath forming white clouds around them. She dropped to her knees and hugged him. You're the best, you know that? The dog gave a low rumble of agreement, the sound more like a chuckle than a growl. Ryan looked back at the slope where the SUV had crashed. The more he studied it, the less it made sense. The tracks were shallow, almost as if the vehicle had drifted instead of slid. No skid marks, no sudden correction on the steering path. Whoever had driven that car hadn't even tried to stop. He stood and turned to Mark. You said the Andersons were heading to church that morning? Yeah, same route every Sunday. And their car. Serviced last week at Dunn's auto shop. Jack Dunn runs it with his wife Sarah. Good folks, I thought. Ryan's eyes narrowed slightly. You thought? Mark hesitated. Jack's fine. It's Sarah that's different. Always got her hands in people's business. The Andersons had a dispute with her about a property line years ago. Nasty thing from what I heard. The wind picked up, pushing needles of snow across the road. Ryan zipped up his jacket and signaled to Rex, who returned to his side instantly. The way the dog moved, measured, silent, made it easy to forget his age. His eyes were sharp, scanning the horizon even as the last light bled from the sky. When they reached the patrol SUV, Ryan opened the rear door for Rex, but the dog hesitated, staring back down the hill. His fur bristled, nose twitching. A low growl built in his chest. Ryan followed his gaze again. Near the edge of the clearing, tire tracks, different from the rescue trucks, curved away into the forest. Smaller wheels, maybe from a pickup. He hadn't noticed them earlier because they'd been covered in drifting snow. Now the setting sun hit just enough angle for the grooves to show. Someone else was here. Ryan murmured. Rex let out a short bark, as if confirming. Ryan pulled out his phone, snapping a few quick photos. The tracks veered off toward an old logging road that no one used anymore. It led straight to the back side of Silver Creek, near the industrial zone, where the Dunn's auto shop sat. That realization set something cold in his stomach. Emma tugged on his sleeve. Officer Cole, is something wrong? He forced a reassuring smile. No, just curious how quick the snow hides things. Go warm up in the truck, all right? She hesitated, studying him with that uncanny awareness kids sometimes have. Then she nodded, pulling Rex's blanket tighter around her shoulders. Mark drove her home a few minutes later, leaving Ryan alone with the wind and the fading sirens in the distance. He crouched again, examining the tire tracks under his flashlight beam. Fresh, less than 6 hours old. The direction they headed made his pulse quicken. He straightened and looked at the empty ridge. All right, Rex. he said quietly. "Looks like we're not done yet." That night, the snow returned with quiet fury. The roads froze, the stars vanished behind grey clouds. In his office, Ryan laid the lug nut on his desk, beside a cup of black coffee. It gleamed under the lamp, unnaturally clean. He made a note in his log. Potential tampering. Brake assembly compromised. Investigation required. Rex lay on the rug near the heater, one paw over his muzzle, but his eyes followed Ryan's every movement. "You still think I'm overreacting?" Ryan asked him, half smiling. The dog lifted his head, ears forward. No bark this time, just that steady look, the same one he'd given when he found the missing hikers 3 winters ago. "Yeah," Ryan murmured. "Didn't think so." He picked up the lug nut again, turning it between his fingers. If the brakes had been cut intentionally, then someone had meant for the Andersons to die. But who? And why? Outside, the wind roared like the ocean. Somewhere far off, a faint engine hummed before fading into the storm. Rex lifted his head again, nose twitching toward the window. His growl was deep and low, the kind that came from instinct, not fear. Ryan crossed to the curtain and looked out. For a brief second, a pair of headlights glowed at the edge of the woods. Too still, too quiet. Then they flicked off. He waited, but nothing moved. Only the sound of the heater filled the room. "Whoever you are," he whispered, "you picked the wrong mountain." Rex settled back down, but his ears stayed alert. Outside, Silver Creek slept under the storm's weight, unaware that its peace had already been broken. The morning light over Silver Creek was pale and sickly, the kind that turned frost into glass. Inside the small county hospital, the hallways smelled of disinfectant and stale coffee. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a cold, sterile glow. Officer Ryan Cole walked quietly down the corridor, boots clicking against a linoleum, his badge glinting faintly with each step. Room 112. He pushed the door open gently. Linda Anderson lay still, pale against the white sheets, an oxygen tube running beneath her nose. Machines whispered their steady rhythm, the only proof that she was still alive. In the next bed, her husband, Harold Anderson, stirred faintly, one arm bandaged, face bruised. His eyes fluttered open as Ryan approached. "Mr. Anderson," Ryan said softly, taking off his hat. "It's Officer Cole. You're at Silver Creek Hospital. You were in an accident yesterday. Do you remember what happened?" The old man's gaze wandered, cloudy with confusion. Then it sharpened suddenly, fear flashing behind the grey. His lips moved, dry and cracked. "Not accident," he whispered, voice trembling. "They wanted us gone." Ryan leaned closer, pulse quickening. "Who wanted you gone?" The man tried to speak again, but his throat seized. The heart monitor spiked, beeping faster. A nurse hurried in, checking his vitals, giving Ryan a brief, apologetic glance. "He can't talk right now, officer. He needs rest." Ryan stepped back, frustration flickering in his eyes. "When he's stable, I need to know exactly what he said." The nurse nodded, adjusting the IV line. "I'll let you know." As Ryan turned to leave, movement at the far end of the corridor caught his eye. A woman stood there, her posture too perfect, her smile too smooth. Blonde hair pinned neatly beneath a designer hat, coat pressed and spotless despite the slush outside. "Officer Cole," she said, voice like glass over ice. "I'm Sarah Dunn. Harold and Linda are my in-laws." Ryan had heard the name. The Dunn family owned one of the largest auto shops in town. Jack Dunn, Sarah's husband, was well liked. Sarah herself was known for running charity events and being in every front-page photograph that mattered. He nodded politely. "Ma'am, the doctors say your in-laws are lucky to be alive." Sarah's eyes flickered. Yes, a miracle, really. The way she said it, flat, rehearsed, made his gut tighten. She folded her hands, nails painted immaculate crimson. I can't imagine how this happened. Jack serviced their car just last week. He's beside himself. Ryan held her gaze. Was it a brake job? Routine maintenance. She smiled again, but it didn't reach her eyes. You don't think this was something else, do you? Not yet, he said evenly. But I'll know soon enough. She tilted her head slightly, studying him the way a cat studies a bird before it moves. I'm sure you will. When she turned to leave, her perfume lingered in the hallway, a faint trace of lilac and engine oil. It was the kind of scent that shouldn't belong together. Ryan watched her go, uneasy. Then he pulled out his notepad and wrote down 2 words. Not accident. Outside, the wind picked up, sweeping snow across the parking lot. He climbed into his patrol SUV and sat there for a long moment, engine idling. Through the windshield, the mountains loomed over the town, silent, indifferent. At the Clark house, the day had just begun. The scent of bacon and wood smoke filled the kitchen. Emma sat at the table, poking at her breakfast, while her father read the local paper. Rex lay by the back door, eyes fixed on the snow-covered yard. His ears twitched at every passing gust. Eat, kiddo, Mark said without looking up. I'm not hungry. Because you didn't sleep, he replied gently. You were up half the night. Emma hesitated. Rex wouldn't come inside. He kept barking at the woods. Mark lowered the paper. Probably deer again. She shook her head. No, it wasn't like that. Her voice grew small. He was growling toward the road, the one that goes to the auto shop. Mark frowned, setting his mug down. Dunn's place? Yeah, he wouldn't move until I made him. He even scratched the door when I closed it. Rex's ears lifted at the mention of his name. He stood and padded to the window, nose pressed against the glass, staring toward the tree line that hid the winding road. His hackles rose. Mark sighed. He's too old to be out there in the cold. Let him rest, Em. But she kept watching Rex. There was something in the way the dog stood. Rigid, alert, the same posture he'd had at the crash site. She couldn't explain it, but she knew he wasn't barking at ghosts. That afternoon, Ryan drove back to the station to review his case notes. The mechanic shop's name kept circling his thoughts like a loose screw. He called dispatch. Cole here. I need the maintenance report for a silver SUV, license number ending in 273. Owner, Harold Anderson. The operator hesitated. Copy that, officer. Looks like the work was logged at Dunn's Auto, 1 week before the crash. Ryan's jaw tightened. Who performed the service? Signed by Jack Dunn, but there's a second initial. DW. He frowned. DW? Probably an employee. Ryan ended the call, tapping the pen against his notepad. Outside, the snow had begun again, soft but relentless. He stared out the frosted window, the silence thick enough to hear his own heartbeat. At that same moment, miles away, Emma sat by the fire with Rex's head resting on her lap. The flames flickered gold across his dark fur. She whispered, "What is it you're trying to tell us, boy?" Rex's eyes met hers, steady, unblinking. His ears pricked toward the sound of a distant engine rumbling along the road. He let out one low growl, deep and certain, the kind that vibrated through the floorboards. Emma turned toward the window. Through the curtain of snow, she saw headlights passing. Too slow, too deliberate. A white pickup, moving toward Dunn's auto shop. She didn't say anything, but her small hand found Rex's collar. The dog stayed perfectly still, muscles tense beneath her fingers. He wasn't afraid. He was waiting. In that frozen silence, the mountain seemed to whisper again. Something dark had begun to stir beneath the snow, and neither man nor child yet understood how deep it ran. The snow had thinned into a steady drizzle by the time Ryan Cole pulled into the parking lot of Dunn's Auto Repair. The building sat at the edge of town, a low, corrugated shed lined with old tires and a flickering neon sign that read, "Open," though the grey light made the word look like a warning. Inside, the air was thick with oil, grease, and metal dust, an odour that stuck to your clothes long after you left. Jack Dunn stood near a half-dismantled truck, his flannel shirt rolled at the sleeves, grease streaked along his wrists. He forced a smile when he saw Ryan step out of the patrol SUV. "Officer Cole," he greeted, wiping his hands on a rag. "Heard you're working on the Anderson case. Hell of a thing. How are they?" "Alive, barely," Ryan replied, his tone steady. "I came to ask a few questions about the maintenance you did for them last week." Jack hesitated for a fraction of a second before nodding. "Sure. Routine stuff. Brake check, oil change, tire rotation. Nothing major." "Mind if I take a look at your work order?" "Of course not." Jack disappeared into the office, leaving Ryan alone with the rhythmic hum of the space heater and the sound of tools clinking in the back. Rex followed silently, sniffing the concrete floor. His paws left faint prints in the layer of oil dust. When he passed a red toolbox, his nose froze mid-air. A low growl rumbled from his chest. Ryan's instincts sharpened instantly. "What is it, boy?" Rex moved closer, pressing his nose to the bottom drawer. His tail stiffened, hackles rising. Then he barked once, short and sharp, before pawing the handle. The noise drew the attention of a young man at the workbench. "Easy, dog," he muttered. His name tag read Tommy. His hands were trembling slightly as he tightened a bolt that didn't need tightening. Ryan crouched beside the toolbox and slid the drawer open. The smell hit him. Chemical and metallic, strong enough to sting the eyes. Inside sat an open container of brake fluid, half full, the label peeled off. Next to it, a set of wrenches still slick with something wet. Ryan lifted the container carefully. "This yours?" Tommy swallowed hard. I was just cleaning up. Jack said—" He cut himself off when Jack returned, clipboard in hand. "Everything all right here?" Jack asked, his smile a little too tight. Ryan held up the container. "Mind telling me why this brake fluid's sitting open? You usually leave this stuff out with the cap off?" Jack's gaze flicked toward Tommy before returning to Ryan. "Guess the kid forgot to close it. We've been short-staffed. Things get messy." Rex barked again, circling Jack once before sitting between him and the toolbox. His body language was unmistakable, guarding. "Your dog doesn't like me much," Jack said, attempting a laugh. "Rex has good instincts," Ryan replied. "He's never wrong about people." The silence between them grew heavy. Ryan set the container down and leaned against the workbench casually, but his eyes were sharp. "You said you serviced the Andersons' SUV on the 10th. "That's right." "Funny, the receipt says the 12th. Jack blinked, his confidence slipping. "Must be a filing error. My wife does most of the paperwork." Ryan nodded slowly. "Your wife? Sarah Dunn." "She helps out when she can. Why?" "No reason," Ryan said, slipping his phone from his pocket. He took several photos of the tools and the open fluid container. "Just keeping the record clean." Jack crossed his arms, jaw tightening. "You think I did something wrong, officer?" Ryan met his eyes. "I think I'll let the evidence tell me that." Tommy dropped his wrench with a clatter that made everyone flinch. He muttered an apology, face pale, and hurried to the back room. Rex's ears twitched as the door slammed shut. He growled softly, pacing toward the sound, but Ryan raised a hand. "Leave it." He turned to Jack. "Appreciate your time." "Any time, officer," Jack said, though his voice lacked conviction. When Ryan stepped outside, the cold air felt sharper. The sky hung low, swollen with grey clouds. He opened the rear door of the SUV, and Rex jumped in, still restless. Inside the patrol car, Ryan replayed the interaction in his mind. Jack's answers were too rehearsed, Tommy's fear too raw. Something wasn't adding up. He started the engine, the heater blowing warm air across the windshield, and reached for his tablet. The state traffic cameras near Silver Ridge Highway were logged in the system. He keyed in the date of the crash and waited for the video feed to load. At first, all he saw was swirling snow and static. Then a flicker, headlights appearing around 7:30 a.m., half an hour before the Andersons' car went off the road. A white pickup truck. He paused the footage, zoomed in. The plate number came into focus. 88217W, registered to Sarah Dunn. Ryan leaned back, heart pounding. "You were there," he murmured. Rex, sensing the shift in his tone, lifted his head and gave a low, questioning bark. "Yeah, boy," Ryan said quietly, still staring at the frozen frame on the screen. "We've got ourselves a ghost in the snow." He transferred the footage to his drive, pocketed the flash, and sat in silence for a moment. Outside, the storm had stopped, but the world felt colder than before. As he pulled away from the garage, Rex stood on the seat, looking out the window, ears perked toward the direction they'd come from. Ryan followed the dog's gaze through the rearview mirror. There, behind the fogged glass of the workshop, Sarah Dunn stood at the office window, her red coat unmistakable even through the frost. She was watching him leave, and though she smiled, there was no warmth in it, only calculation. The hospital room was quiet except for the steady pulse of the heart monitor. Afternoon sunlight filtered through the blinds in pale stripes, cutting across the sterile floor. Officer Ryan Cole stood near the window, flipping through his notes from the accident report. The Anderson case was starting to feel less like a crash and more like a warning wrapped in ice. He turned as Emma Clark stepped inside, holding a small bouquet of winter flowers. Her father followed, stopping at the door. "She wanted to thank them," Mark said softly. Ryan smiled faintly. "That's a kind thing to do, Emma." The girl nodded, walking toward Linda Anderson's bed. The old woman was still unconscious, but Emma spoke to her anyway, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're going to be okay. Rex says so." Ryan's chest tightened. For a child who had seen what she'd seen, her calmness was unsettling, almost mature. He crouched down beside her. "Hey, kiddo, how are you holding up?" She hesitated. "Rex keeps growling at the woods at night. I think he remembers something I forgot." Ryan frowned. "Like what?" Emma bit her lip, eyes darting between him and the window. "That morning, before we found the car, I saw someone." Ryan's heartbeat kicked up. "Someone? Where?" "Near the trees by the ridge. A woman. She was wearing red gloves." Ryan's pulse stopped for a second. "Are you sure?" Emma nodded quickly. "I know because the snow stuck to them, and she waved at me. I thought she was a hiker. But then she said something. I didn't understand it then." He leaned forward, his tone calm but precise. "What did she say?" Emma looked down, her fingers twisting the corner of the blanket. She said, "Don't worry, they won't get far." The words hung in the air, heavy and cold. Ryan felt the temperature in the room drop. "Emma, did you recognize her?" The girl hesitated. She was wearing a hat, but she looked like Mrs. Dunn, the lady from church. Ryan stood slowly, the muscles in his jaw tightening. He turned away so Emma couldn't see the shift in his expression. His mind was already connecting dots, the open brake fluid, the false service date, the white truck on the highway. And now this. He thanked the Clarks and walked them to the lobby. As they left, Rex trotted alongside Emma, tail wagging lazily. But when Sarah Dunn entered the hospital at that exact moment, her heels clicking against tile, Rex's entire body changed. His fur bristled, a deep growl rising from his chest. The girl froze, clutching his collar. Sarah smiled thinly. Well, if it isn't our little hero. Her tone was sweet, but her eyes were sharp as glass. I heard you're quite the talk of the town. Emma said nothing, but Rex didn't take his eyes off her. His teeth showed just enough to make Sarah step back slightly. Ryan appeared behind them. Everything all right here? Sarah's smile tightened. Perfectly fine, officer. I was just visiting my in-laws again. Such a tragedy. Funny, Ryan said evenly. You seem to have perfect timing lately. She tilted her head, pretending confusion. Timing? Showing up right before the crash. Then again after every interview. You must care a great deal. Her eyes hardened. Is that a problem? Not unless you make it one. They stared at each other for a long moment. Then she turned sharply, her perfume leaving that same faint trace of lilac and oil as she walked away. Rex's gaze followed her until she disappeared around the corner. That night, back at the station, Ryan opened the county archives. Files from land disputes, property transfers, inheritance records. It didn't take long to find what he was looking for. Property, 42 acres north of Silver Creek Ridge. Owner Harold and Linda Anderson. Co-heir listed, Sarah Dunn, née Anderson. Status, inactive sale. Blocked by court injunction filed by Harold Anderson, March last year. The accompanying note read, Proposed buyer, Silver Ridge Mining and Extraction Co. Ryan sat back, exhaling slowly. Sarah had tried to sell her inheritance rights to a mining company, but Harold had refused to sign off. If both he and Linda were gone, the ownership would automatically revert to their only living heir. He stared at the paperwork until the words blurred. He didn't want to believe it yet. He'd seen greed before, but this was something colder, calculated. Rex lay near his chair, ears twitching at the faint hum of the heater. The dog's eyes were half closed, but Ryan could tell he wasn't asleep. Looks like Emma was right again, he said quietly. You knew, didn't you? You smelled it on her. Rex lifted his head, meeting his gaze. His tail thumped once against the floor, slow, deliberate, almost like a nod. Ryan stood, pacing toward the evidence board pinned above his desk. He tacked up a photo of the Andersons' wrecked SUV beside a still frame from the highway camera. The white truck. The timestamp glowed 7:31 a.m., 30 minutes before the crash. He circled the plate number and scribbled one word beneath it. Sarah. The pieces fit too well, too easily. And that made him nervous. He sat back down, rubbing his temples. The snow outside had started again, coating the parking lot in another layer of silence. The world was good at burying its sins under white blankets. His phone buzzed. A text from the hospital. Mr. Anderson awake for brief period. Requesting you. Ryan grabbed his coat. Let's go, partner. Rex was already standing by the door, ready. By the time they reached the hospital, the night had deepened. But as they walked the corridor, a nurse stopped them halfway. Her face was pale. I'm sorry, officer. He didn't make it. Ryan's chest tightened. Did he say anything before he passed? The nurse hesitated. Just one thing. He said, Tell her we knew. Ryan stood still, the words echoing like distant thunder. Who did he mean? The nurse shook her head. He didn't say. Rex leaned against Ryan's leg, eyes lifted. The silence between them was heavy. Ryan looked toward the dark window at the end of the hall, snowflakes swirling like ghosts. Whatever secret the Andersons had tried to bury, someone had made sure they couldn't speak it aloud. But the mountain, the dog, and the child had already started whispering the truth. The night in Silver Creek was quiet, too quiet for a town used to wind and snow. The storm had finally lifted, leaving a calm that felt wrong, like the mountain was holding its breath. Inside his cabin, Officer Ryan Cole sat half awake on the couch, paperwork scattered across the table. Rex lay by the door, head resting on his paws, his ears flicking at every distant sound. Then, all at once, he was on his feet. A sharp bark cut through the silence, echoing against the cabin walls. Ryan jolted upright. Rex was already pawing at the door, teeth bared, eyes locked on something outside. "What is it, boy?" The next bark was louder, urgent, followed by a faint orange glow spilling through the snow-covered trees. Ryan stepped onto the porch, and his stomach dropped. Flames, high, angry, and growing, were clawing at the sky from the direction of Dunn's auto repair. He grabbed his coat and flashlight. "Let's go." Rex leapt into the patrol SUV before Ryan even opened the door fully. The tires spun over icy roads as they sped through the sleeping town. Sirens joined them moments later, the sound bouncing between the hills. When they reached the edge of the property, the garage was already half consumed. Fire tore through the roof, black smoke pouring into the air. The metallic stench of burning oil and rubber made Ryan's throat sting. "Damn it," he muttered, slamming the door and running forward. This wasn't an accident. Rex bounded ahead, weaving between hoses and firefighters shouting orders. The air shimmered with heat, embers dancing like angry insects. Ryan pulled his scarf over his mouth and followed. Through the chaos, a figure broke from the shadows behind the burning structure, a man stumbling, coughing, reeking of gasoline. "Hey!" Ryan shouted. "Stop right there!" The man turned. It was Tommy, the mechanic's assistant. His eyes were wide and wild, his jacket half-burned. He hesitated, then bolted toward the back fence. Rex didn't wait for an order. The dog charged, cutting through smoke like a bullet. Within seconds, he tackled Tommy into the snow, teeth gripping the man's sleeve without breaking skin. "Get him off! Get him off!" Tommy shouted, struggling uselessly. Ryan reached them, cuffs snapping around Tommy's wrists. "You picked a bad night to run, kid." Tommy's chest heaved, his breath fogging in the cold air. "You don't understand." He choked. "She told me to do it. Sarah, she said burn everything." Ryan's grip tightened. "Sarah Dunn." Tommy nodded, eyes glassy with fear. "She said the cops were sniffing around. Said if they found what was in the floor, we were both dead." "What's in the floor?" Tommy hesitated, glancing toward the fire. "Under the tool bench, metal box. Her husband kept it there. She said it had recordings or something, proof of the breaks." Ryan looked at the building again. The roof was groaning, collapsing inward. Flames were chewing through the rafters. He handed Tommy off to a firefighter. "Get him in custody. Don't let anyone near that building until I'm done." "Ryan, you can't go in there!" One of them yelled. "It's about to fall!" But he was already running. Inside, the heat hit like a wall. Smoke curled low to the ground, thick and choking. Rex followed close, his paws slipping on oil-slick concrete. Ryan crouched low, scanning with his flashlight until it caught the shape of a workbench, half swallowed by fire. "Rex, find it!" The dog sniffed the air once, then darted toward the corner, barking sharply. He began digging through debris with powerful swipes of his paws. Sparks rained down from the ceiling as Ryan moved beside him, pulling away broken boards and melted metal. Then Rex stopped. His paw struck something hard. A small rectangular object, half buried beneath layers of soot and dust. A metal box, blackened but intact. "That's it." Ryan breathed. He grabbed it, burning his gloves, and stuffed it under his coat. A beam above them cracked and fell, barely missing Rex's tail. The dog jumped back, barking frantically. "Out, go!" Ryan shouted. They ran through the smoke, Ryan coughing, eyes watering. The air roared around them, the oxygen feeding the inferno. Just as they reached the exit, An explosion split the night, a fuel tank igniting in the back. The blast knocked them both off their feet, sending shards of glass through the air. Ryan landed hard on the snow outside, the world spinning. A firefighter pulled him up as Rex crawled to his side, coughing and shaking, but alive. The dog's fur was singed at the edges, his chest rising fast. "You're okay," Ryan gasped, clutching the dog's collar. "You're okay, partner." The metal box clattered onto the snow beside them, its lock half melted but still sealed. Ryan wiped soot from the top and squinted. The faint letters Anderson SUV were etched into the lid. He turned to Tommy, who was now sitting in the back of the patrol car, hands cuffed and face streaked with ash. This what she was so desperate to destroy? Tommy nodded weakly. She said it had recordings from the dash cam. Her husband installed one after their last argument with the old man. She thought they didn't know. Ryan exhaled, adrenaline still buzzing through his veins. "You picked the wrong side, kid." Tommy's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't want to. I thought it was just a fire, to hide bad paperwork. I didn't know she cut the brakes." Rex stood beside Ryan, silent now, his gaze fixed on the burning skeleton of the garage. The reflection of the flames shimmered in his eyes like liquid gold. A firefighter approached, shaking his head. "The building's gone. Nothing left but steel." Ryan looked down at the metal box, then at Rex. "That's all we need." He lifted the box carefully, tucking it under his arm. "We're heading back to the station. Time to see what the Andersons' car really saw." As he turned toward the truck, Rex limped slightly, one paw singed but uncomplaining. The dog's eyes followed the fire until they were out of sight, as if memorizing every flicker. In the rearview mirror, Ryan watched the workshop crumble into itself, sparks drifting upward into the night sky like souls leaving the earth. He reached over and scratched behind Rex's ear. "Good work, partner." Rex looked at him once, eyes steady, before turning his gaze back to the road ahead. The truth was finally in their hands, but as the flames died behind them, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah Dunn wasn't finished yet. The snow had returned to Silver Creek, soft and slow this time, blanketing the town in a silence that felt almost sacred. A month had passed since the night of the fire, but the scent of smoke still lingered faintly on the wind, like the ghost of everything that had burned away. Lies, greed, and fear. Inside the small courthouse, the air was heavy with murmurs. Reporters, locals, and neighbors packed into the wooden benches, their breaths clouding the cold air. Officer Ryan Cole stood near the front, uniform crisp, expression composed but tired. Beside him, Rex lay at attention, his fur brushed clean, his collar gleaming with the silver tag of the rescue unit. Across the aisle, Sarah Dunn sat shackled at the wrists, her once elegant appearance wilted beneath the harsh lights. Gone was the woman who glided through fundraisers with pearls and red lipstick. In her place sat someone hollowed by consequence. Her eyes darted between the judge and the evidence box resting on the table. Inside, the melted metal case and the salvaged dash cam recordings that sealed her fate. The judge's voice filled the room, calm yet absolute. "Sarah Dunn, this court finds you guilty of attempted murder, arson, and insurance fraud. You are hereby sentenced to 25 years in state prison." A ripple of sound swept through the room. Some gasped, others nodded quietly. Sarah's lips parted, trembling, as she looked towards the floor. "Tommy Walsh," the judge continued, "for your cooperation with law enforcement and testimony provided, this court sentences you to 10 years with eligibility for parole after 6. Tommy bowed his head, tears streaking down his soot-scarred face. Ryan didn't move. He only felt Rex's head press lightly against his leg, grounding him in the moment. When the gavel struck, It echoed like thunder through the courthouse. Sarah turned once, her gaze catching Ryan's for a fleeting second. "I didn't want to kill them," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I just wanted what was mine." Ryan's reply was quiet but sharp enough to cut through the air. "You didn't want justice. You wanted to erase it." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Sarah was led away, her footsteps fading down the corridor. Outside, the sky was impossibly blue, the kind of blue that only came after storms. A week later, the town gathered at Silver Creek Square. Snow sparkled like crushed diamonds beneath the sunlight, and garlands hung from the lampposts. A small wooden stage stood near the old fountain, decorated with red ribbons and evergreen branches. The mayor, Margaret Hayes, stepped up to the microphone. Her cheeks were flushed pink from the cold, but her voice carried strong and warm. "Today," she said, "we honor not only courage, but compassion. When fear could have frozen us, one child, one officer, and one remarkable dog reminded us what humanity looks like." The crowd erupted in applause. Emma stood beside her father in the front row, bundled in a wool coat 2 sizes too big, cheeks rosy with pride. Ryan stood behind them, hat in hand. Rex sat tall at his side, tail still, eyes bright. The mayor continued, "By the wish of Harold and Linda Anderson, who are with us today, fully recovered, their family land will be donated to build a new emergency rescue outpost. It will serve our mountain communities and carry a name that reminds us of who we are, Hayden Ridge Rescue Outpost." Applause thundered again, louder this time, echoing off the surrounding hills. The Andersons waved weakly from their seats, tears glistening in Linda's eyes. "And now," the mayor said, turning toward Rex, "for his unwavering loyalty and bravery during the Silver Creek rescue operation, we present the K9 Valor Medal to Rex, the guardian of Silver Creek." A young firefighter stepped forward and placed a polished medal around Rex's neck. The ribbon caught the light, shimmering gold against his dark fur. The crowd rose to their feet, applause swelling into cheers. Rex didn't bark. He simply lifted his head higher, chest expanding as the winter wind stirred his fur. His gaze swept over the crowd, calm and steady, like a soldier surveying his post. Ryan knelt beside him, one hand resting gently on the dog's shoulder. "You earned it, partner," he said under his breath. "Every second of it." Emma broke from the crowd and hugged Rex's neck tightly, whispering, "You saved them, didn't you? Grandpa would have liked you." Rex turned his head and licked her mitten, his tail wagging once, deliberate and proud. The mayor's voice carried through the air again. "Sometimes heroes don't wear badges, sometimes they wear fur." The laughter and applause that followed felt lighter, freer. Even the snow seemed to fall slower, as if the town itself wanted to remember this moment. After the ceremony, people gathered near the new construction site where the outpost would stand. The foundation had been cleared, the first stones laid, and a wooden sign read, "In honor of those who keep watch when the mountain sleeps." Ryan stood beside Emma and her father, watching as Rex bounded across the snow with 2 children chasing him. His paw prints dotted the white expanse like a trail of faith leading forward. Mark Clark turned to Ryan. "You ever think of running that new outpost?" Ryan smiled faintly. "Maybe, but I think Rex already applied for the job." They both laughed quietly. The tension of the past month melted into something gentler, hope, maybe even forgiveness. When the bell tower struck noon, the sound carried over the valley, clear and clean. Ryan glanced toward the hills, where the wind whispered through the pines. Rex returned and sat beside him, muzzle tipped slightly toward the sky. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Snow fell around them again, soft, steady, and peaceful. the kind of snow that doesn't erase footprints, but preserves them. A full year had passed since the fire, the arrests, and the long trial that had tested every soul in Silver Creek. Winter had returned again, quiet, gentle this time, its snow falling like forgiveness over the mountain valley. The new rescue outpost stood proudly at the base of Hayden Ridge, its wooden walls glowing amber in the early morning light. A flag rippled above the roof, marked with the town's crest and the motto chosen by its founders: to serve with heart, to guard in silence. They had named it Rex's Haven. The name was Ryan's idea, but the town had voted unanimously. The place was more than a training ground. It was a sanctuary for new rescue dogs and the handlers who trained beside them. It was where courage was taught, not as instinct, but as legacy. Emma Clark, now 11, stepped out of her father's pickup truck, her boots crunching into the fresh snow. Her red scarf fluttered behind her as she gazed up at the building, awe bright in her eyes. "It's bigger than I thought," she whispered. Her father, Mark, smiled, tucking his hands into his jacket. "It's everything your grandpa used to dream about. And now, it's real." Ryan approached from across the lot, his coat zipped high against the cold. His hair had grown longer, streaked with silver at the edges, but his eyes still held that steady calm. "Morning," he greeted, his breath fogging in the air. "I wasn't sure you'd make it through the storm." Mark chuckled. "Nothing keeps her away from this place. She's been counting the days." Emma smiled shyly and pointed towards the statue near the outpost's entrance. "Can we go see him?" Ryan nodded. "Of course." They walked across the courtyard, where the new recruits were training with their dogs, Labradors, Malinois, Shepherds, all harnessed and focused. Their barks echoed against the mountains like music. The scent of pine and wet snow filled the air. At the center of the courtyard stood a bronze statue, life-sized, gleaming beneath the pale sun. It captured Rex in motion, his head raised, muscles taut, eyes forward as if he were still on the trail. At the statue's base, a stone plaque read, "For those who listened to the silence before." "Saving lives!" Emma crouched beside it, her mitten brushing away the dust of snow. From her coat pocket, she pulled out a small folded cloth, the red scarf Rex had worn during the final ceremony. The edges were frayed now, but it still carried faint traces of his scent. She placed it gently at the statue's paws. For a long moment, none of them spoke. The wind shifted, soft but distinct, and the chime hanging from the outpost's porch began to ring. The sound was delicate, but it carried, clear, rhythmic, like a distant bark rolling down from the ridge. Emma looked up towards the mountains. "Do you think he can hear us?" Ryan smiled faintly. "I think he never really left." She nodded, blinking back the cold tears that stung her eyes. "He was brave, wasn't he?" "The bravest partner I ever had," Ryan said, not because he saved lives, but because he believed in them. Mark placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "He believed in you too, kiddo. Don't forget that." Behind them, a group of young handlers began a training drill. The sound of commands and barks filled the air again, full of life and purpose. A German Shepherd pup, barely a year old, broke formation and ran toward Emma, its tail wagging wildly. She laughed, kneeling to let the pup nuzzle her hands. "Hey, you're not supposed to leave class." Ryan walked over, chuckling. "That's Scout," he said. "Born here last spring. He's got the same streak of trouble Rex had." Emma looked into the pup's eyes, amber and curious, and for a second it felt like the mountain itself was breathing again. Ryan handed her a small wooden badge engraved with the words, "Junior Rescuer." "Your grandpa used to give these to new recruits," he said. "Figured it's about time you got one." Emma turned it over in her hands, smiling. Does that mean I get to train here one day? If you listen to the silence before you act. Ryan replied. That's how he started. That's how Rex did too. The chime rang again, louder now as the wind swept through the valley. Snowflakes drifted across the statue's face, settling in the grooves of its bronze fur. Ryan tilted his head toward the ridge, where the sunlight was breaking through a pocket of clouds. You know, on mornings like this, I swear I can still hear him out there, that low bark echoing between the trees. Mark smiled. That's not memory. That's legacy. Emma stood, brushing snow off her knees, and looked up at the mountains one more time. The world felt big, but not lonely. Somewhere in that endless white silence, she imagined Rex running, his paws kicking up powder, his spirit alive in every gust of wind that swept across the ridge. As they turned to leave, the chime rang once more, soft but sure. And if anyone had been listening closely, they might have sworn they heard a bark, steady, distant, proud, answering back from the mountains of Silver Creek. Dawn spilled over, the snow-dusted hills of Hayden Ridge turning the world gold. The cold air shimmered as the first light reached the porch of the outpost. There, lying on an old wool blanket, Rex stirred gently. His muzzle was silver now, his body slower, but his eyes, those steady amber eyes, still carried the same sharp focus that once cut through smoke and danger. He wasn't the young guardian who had charged into burning buildings or tracked down hidden truths anymore, but he remained what he had always been, a watcher. Ryan stepped out from the cabin, coffee steaming in his hand. He paused for a moment, just watching the old dog breathe in the morning air. "You beat me up again," he murmured, smiling. "Guess habits don't die easy, huh?" Rex's ear flicked at the sound of his voice. He turned his head slightly, gaze fixed on the ridgeline in the distance. The same stretch of mountains where everything had begun. A light crunch of boots came from behind. Emma, now taller and with a quiet confidence about her, walked across the porch holding 2 mugs of cocoa. "Dad said you'd be out here," she said, handing one to Ryan. "He thinks you love this dog more than coffee." Ryan laughed softly. "Maybe he's right." They sat in silence for a while, the kind of silence that didn't need words. The valley below was waking up, smoke rising from chimneys, the faint hum of trucks heading out to the forest trails, a few rescue dogs barking in the distance during morning drills. Life had returned to Silver Creek, steady and sure. Emma glanced at Rex, who was resting his head on his paws, eyes half closed but alert as ever. "Do you think he still remembers?" she asked quietly. Ryan looked at her, then back at the old shepherd. "He never forgets," he said. "He just guards in silence." The words seemed to linger in the air, soft as breath. A breeze swept through the trees, rattling the chimes above the porch. The sound echoed faintly, like a faraway bark bouncing between the mountain peaks. Emma smiled, clutching her mug tighter. "Mom says he saved more people than anyone else in town," she said. "Even more than you." Ryan's eyes softened. "He didn't save them for medals, kid. He saved them because he couldn't stand still when someone was in danger. That's what courage really is." Emma thought about that for a moment, watching as Rex lifted his head again, staring toward the horizon where the light was breaking fully over the ridge. His tail gave a slow, steady wag. "You know," she whispered, "sometimes I feel like he's still waiting for something." Ryan smiled faintly. "He's not waiting. He's remembering." The air around them was still, the kind of peace that only comes after storms and loss. From inside the cabin came the faint crackle of the radio, the morning broadcast from Rex's Haven Rescue Station. The announcer's voice carried through the open window. Today marks 1 year since the founding of the Hayden Ridge Rescue Outpost, home of the Silver Creek K9 Unit. To every handler and every dog who gives their life to protect others, we say thank you. Ryan leaned back in his chair. You hear that, partner? They're still talking about you. Rex blinked slowly, his gaze never leaving the mountains. The wind brushed through his fur like a gentle hand. After a while, Emma got up and walked toward the edge of the porch. She picked up the small wooden badge she'd been given months ago, the one engraved Junior Rescuer. It had a small scratch down the center from when she'd dropped it during her first training session. She placed it on the railing beside Rex. For you, she said softly, because you started all of this. Rex's eyes met hers for a heartbeat, deep, knowing calm. Then he lowered his head again, resting it over his paws. The sun had risen fully now, flooding the valley in gold. The snow sparkled like glass, and the wind carried a sound that might have been nothing, or maybe the faintest echo of a bark from far across the ridge. Ryan stood and looked out at the horizon. He's still watching, he said quietly. Always will be. Emma nodded. Good, she whispered, because we'll always need him. As they turned to head inside, the chime above the porch rang once more, clear and pure, like a signal from something beyond sight. The camera would pull back slowly now, across the porch, over the valley, past the new outpost where young handlers trained with their dogs, their laughter mixing with the steady rhythm of paws in the snow. And then the frame would find its way back to the porch, where Rex lay still, eyes open, guarding the mountains. The light faded into the shape of his silhouette, noble and unmoving. The screen darkened, and in the quiet that followed, words appeared against the golden sky. He didn't bark for food. He barked for the truth. What's your story with a loyal pet? Subscribe to German Shepherd Stories, where loyalty never fades and courage lives forever.